morning, everyone. Today we are going to look at adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So our aims for today are looking at adding and subtracting mixed number fractions. So any pre-existing skills that will really help you with today's lesson is making sure that we can add and subtract fractions, so that's those with like and unlike denominators, and be able to convert between improper and mixed number fractions. So when we are adding and subtracting mixed number fractions, whether you are adding or subtracting, it's really important to know that the method is always the same. So you're not going to change the way that you add or subtract fractions with mixed numbers. There's not going to be two different methods. This is going to be the method that you use, whether or not the question is an add or whether the question is a subtract. So our first step is to convert the mixed numbers into improper fractions, and that's where your pre-existing knowledge of those conversions are going to come into play. Your pre-existing knowledge of adding and subtracting fractions is then going to come in with this next two elements, because your second step is to make the denominators of both fractions the same. And always remember, when we're changing bottom numbers, whatever we do to the bottom, we must also do to the top. Then we're going to add and subtract the top numbers. So whenever you are adding and subtracting a fraction, you only add or subtract the top and you keep the bottom numbers the same. And then we're going to go back to the conversion and we're going to convert the improper fraction back to a mixed number. So let's have a look at how we're now going to do this. And I'm going to keep everything colour coordinated so you can match the step with the working out on the left hand side. So whether you are adding and subtracting mixed number fractions, remember the method is always the same. So this is what a mixed number add would look like in your exam. So it would be 1 2/5 add 2 1/10. So our first red step that we're going to do is we're going to convert the mixed number fractions into improper. So as we know, to convert a mixed number to an improper, we do the whole multiplied by the bottom and then we add the top. So we do 1 multiplied by 5, which is 5, add 2, then becomes 7 over the original bottom, which is then 5. And we're going to do exactly the same to the opposite side. 2 multiplied by 10, which is 20, add the 1, and we've got 21 over 10. So that's our first step done. We've converted them now into improper. The most important part to remember whenever you are adding or subtracting fractions, it's all about the bottom number. You cannot add or subtract a fraction without making those bottom numbers the same. So as we can see, we can actually turn 5 into tens because all we do to this bottom is multiply it by 2 to get this one to 10. So we're going to make both our bottom numbers out of 10. We can keep this one because it's already in tenths, so 21 over 10. So to get our 5 to 10, we times by 2. And remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So because we times the 5 by 2 to make 10, we do the same to the 7. So 7 times by 2 is then 14. I'll just re-go over that. So we ended up with 7 over 5, add 21 over 10. We need to make the bottom numbers the same, so we decided our denominators would be both 10 because 5 can be made into 10. We keep the 21 over 10 because it's already in tenths. And we say to ourselves, how do I get from 5 to 10? So we times by 2 and then we do the same to the top number. So 7 times by 2 is 14. So now we've got the same denominators, all we now need to do is just add or subtract the top numbers. And as the question's an add, we're going to add them. So 14 add 21 is then 34 over 10. And then our final step is to change that back into a mixed number by saying how many tens are in 34, which is 3 and 4 over 10. Now, what we can actually do as well is we can simplify the fraction. So it then becomes 3 and 2 over 5. And that is our final answer. Let's have a go at another one. So, same step, we're going to convert the mixed numbers into improper. So we've got 2 and 1/3, add 3 and 1/4. So 2 times 3 is 6, add the 1, 7 over 3. Then we're going to add our next fraction, so 3 1/4, so we need to convert this first. 3 times 4 is 12, add the 1 is 13/4. And we've done step 1. Our next step, as we know, is to make the denominators the same. But as before, how we could turn 5 into 10, we now need to find what's called a common denominator. What number is in both the 3's and the 4 times table? Or another cheeky way of doing it to find your common denominator is to multiply your bottom numbers together. So if we times 3 by 4, we would then get 12 as our common denominator. So I'm just going to create a little bubble here to find a common denominator. You can multiply your bottoms together. So 3 times 4 would leave us both with 12. Okay, now as before, because we're not keeping one of the fractions, we need to use the same premise as before. So we need to say, how do we get from 3 to 12? So what do you times by 3 to get 12, which is 4? And then we do the same to 7. So 7 times 4 is 28. What do we times by 4 to get to 12? And we multiply by 3. And we do the same to 13. So 10 times 3 would be 30. 3 times 3 is 9. So our answer would be 39. Now, what you could also do to remember that step here is know that you're multiplying each fraction by the opposite denominator. So notice here, we are multiplying this side by 4, the opposite, and we're multiplying this side by 3, the opposite. So now, as before, we're going to add. So 28 add 39, we're left with 67 over 12. And then we're going to convert that. So how many 12s into 67? 12, 24, 36, 48, 60. So that would give us 5 and 7 over 12. And that is our answer. So now just to recap everything that we've done with this one, we converted our mixed numbers into improper. We then changed both our numbers so our denominators were the same, and we did that by multiplying our bottom numbers together to get our common denominator of 12. We timesed each side by the opposite bottom. We then added those together, and then we then worked out how many 12s were in 67, and that gave us our mixed number. So as we've done 2 adds, we're now going to do our final question, which is now a takeaway. And we're going to do exactly the same step. So even though it's a subtraction, we follow exactly the same method. So we've got 7 1/2, take away 1 4/3. So we're going to do 7 times 4, which is 14, add the 1, 15 over 2. And then we're going to take away 1 4/3. So 1 times 3 is 3, add the 4, which is then 7 over 3. Okay, now we're going to make our denominators the same. Now, as we know, we can't turn 2's into 3, so we're going to have to multiply together to get our common denominator. 2 times 3, and we know our bottom number is then 6. 6 take away, and then our 6 here. How do we get from 2 to 6? Or we're going to multiply by the opposite bottom, so we're going to times that entire fraction by 3. So 15 times by 3 is 45. And then we're going to do the opposite. So 7/3, we're going to times that entire fraction by the opposite side, which is 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. And then we're left with 45 over 6, take away 14 over 6. We're now going to add or subtract them. So 45 take away 14 is then 31 over 6. How many 6's in 31? 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. So we've got 5 and 1/6. And that is how we complete calculations with adding and subtracting fractions.